Jim Clark said. Constance, Constance, I know you're in there. Come and open the door. I was thinking that we might very well put a cloth or a piece of cardboard over the window in the kitchen door. It simply would not do to have Helen Clark constantly peering in to watch pots cooking on the stove. We could pin the curtains together across the kitchen windows, and perhaps, if the windows were all covered, we could sit quietly at the table when Helen Clark came pounding outside, and not have to hide on the cellar stairs. "Let's leave," Jim Clark said. "They're not going to answer you." "But I want to take them home with me." "We did what we could. We'll come back another time when they'll feel more like seeing you." "Constance, Constance, please answer me." Constance sighed and tapped her fingers irritably and almost noiselessly on the stair rail. "I wish she'd hurry," she said into my ear. "My soup is going to boil over." Helen Clark called again and again, going back around the house to their car, calling, "Constance, Constance," as though we might be somewhere in the woods, up a tree perhaps, or under the lettuce leaves, or waiting to spring out at her from behind a bush. When we heard the car start, distantly, we came up out of the cellar, and Constance turned off her soup, and I went along the hall to the front door to be sure they had gone, and that the door was safely locked. I saw their car turn out of the driveway, and thought I could still hear Helen Clark calling, "Constance, Constance." "She certainly wanted her tea," I said to Constance when I came back to the kitchen. "We have only 2 cups with handles," Constance said. "She will never take tea here again." "It's a good thing Uncle Julian's gone, or one of us would have to use a broken cup. Are you going to neaten Uncle Julian's room?" "Mary Cat." Constance turned from the stove to look at me. "What are we going to do?" "We've neatened the house. We've had food. We've hidden from Helen Clark. What are we going to do? Where are we going to sleep? How are we going to know what time it is? What will we wear for clothes?" "Why do we need to know what time it is?" "Our food won't last forever, even the preserves." "We can sleep in my hiding place by the creek." "No, that's all right for hiding, but you must have a real bed." "I saw a mattress on the stairs. For my own old bed, perhaps. We can pull it down and clean it and dry it in the sun. One corner is burned." "Good," said Constance. We went together to the stairs and took hold of the mattress awkwardly. It was unpleasantly wet and dirty. We dragged it, pulling together along the hall, with little scraps of wood and glass coming with it, and got it across Constance's clean kitchen floor to the kitchen door. Before unlocking the door, I looked out carefully, and even when the door was opened, I went out first to look around in every direction. But it was safe. We dragged the mattress out onto the lawn and put it in the sun near our mother's marble bench. "Uncle Julian used to sit right here," I said. It would be a good day today for Uncle Julian to sit in the sun. I hope he was warm when he died. Perhaps he remembered the sun for a minute. I had his shawl. I hope he didn't wish for it. Merricat, I'm going to plant something here, where he used to sit. I am going to bury something for him. What will you plant? A flower. Constance leaned and touched the grass softly. Some kind of a yellow flower. It's going to look funny right in the middle of the lawn. We'll know why it's there, and no one else will ever see it. And I will bury something yellow to keep Uncle Julian warm. First, however, my lazy Mary Cat, you will get a pot of water and scrub that mattress clean, and I will wash the kitchen floor again. We were going to be very happy, I thought. There were a great many things to do, and a whole new pattern of days to arrange, but I thought we were going to be very happy. Constance was pale and still saddened by what they had done to her kitchen, but she had scrubbed every shelf, washed the table again and again, and washed the windows and the floor. Our dishes were bravely on their shelf, and the cans and unbroken boxes of food we had rescued made a substantial row in the pantry. I could train Jonas to bring back rabbits for stew, I told her. And she laughed, and Jonas looked back at her blandly. "That cat is so used to living on cream and rum cakes and buttered eggs that I doubt if he could catch a grasshopper," she said. "I don't think I could care for a grasshopper stew. At any rate, right now, I am making an onion pie." While Constance washed the kitchen, I found a heavy cardboard carton which I took apart carefully, and so had several large pieces of cardboard to cover the glass window in the kitchen door. The hammer and the nails were in the tool shed where Charles Blackwood had put them after trying to mend the broken step, and I nailed cardboard across the kitchen door until the glass was completely covered and no one could see in. I nailed more cardboard across the 2 kitchen windows, and the kitchen was dark, but safe. It would be safer to let the kitchen windows get dirty, I told Constance, but she was shocked and said, "I wouldn't live in a house with dirty windows." When we had finished, the kitchen was very clean but could not sparkle because there was so little light, and I knew that Constance was not pleased. She loved sunshine and brightness and cooking in a light, lovely kitchen. "We can keep the door open," I said, "if we watch carefully all the time. We'll hear if any cars stop in front of the house. When I can," I said, "I will try to think of a way to build barricades along the sides of the house, so no one will be able to come around here to the back." I am sure Helen Clark will try again. At any rate, she cannot look in now. The afternoon was drawing in. Even with the door open, the sunlight came only a short way across the floor, and Jonas came to Constance at the stove, asking for his supper. The kitchen was warm and comfortable and familiar and clean. It would be nice to have a fireplace in here, I thought. We could sit beside a fire. And then I thought, no, we have already had a fire. "I will go and make sure the front door is locked," I said. The front door was locked, and no one was outside. When I came back into the kitchen, Constance said, "Tomorrow I will clean Uncle Julian's room. We have so little house left that it should all be very clean." "Will you sleep in there? In Uncle Julian's bed?" "No, Mary Cat, I want you to sleep in there. It's the only bed we have." "I am not allowed in Uncle Julian's room." She was quiet for a minute, looking at me curiously, and then asked, "Even though Uncle Julian's gone, Mary Cat? Besides, I found the mattress and I cleaned it and it came from my bed. I want it on the floor in my corner." Silly Mary Cat. "Anyway, I'm afraid we'll both have the floor tonight. The mattress will not dry before tomorrow and Uncle Julian's bed is not clean. I can bring branches from my hiding place and leaves." "On my clean kitchen floor?" "I'll get the blanket though and Uncle Julian's shawl." "You're going out now? All that way?" "No one's outside," I said. "It's almost dark and I can go very safely. If anyone comes, close the door and lock it. If I see that the door is closed, I will wait by the creek until I can come safely home, and I will take Jonas for protection." I ran all the way to the creek, but Jonas was faster and was waiting for me when I got to my hiding place. It was good to run, and good to come back again to our house and see the kitchen door standing open and the warm light inside. When Jonas and I came in, I shut the door and bolted it, and we were ready for the night. "It's a good dinner," Constance said, warm and happy from cooking. "Come and sit down, Mary Cat." With the door shut, she had to turn on the ceiling light, and our dishes on the table were neatly set. "Tomorrow, I will try to polish the silverware," she said, "and we must bring in things from the garden. The lettuce is full of ashes." "Tomorrow, too," Constance said, looking at the black squares of cardboard which covered the windows, "I'm going to try to think of some kind of curtains to hide your cardboard. Tomorrow, I will barricade the sides of the house. Tomorrow, Jonas will catch us a rabbit. Tomorrow, I will guess for you what time it is." Far away, in the front of the house, a car stopped, and we were silent, looking at one another. Now, I thought, now we will know how safe we are, and I got up and made sure that the kitchen door was bolted. I could not see out through the cardboard, and I was sure that they could not see in. The knocking started at the front door, but there was no time to make sure that the front door was locked. They knocked only for a moment, as though certain that we would not be in the front of the house, and then we heard them stumbling in the darkness as they tried to find their way around the side of the house to the back. I heard Jim Clark's voice, and another, which I remembered was the voice of Dr. Levy. "Can't see a thing," Jim Clark said. "Black as sin out here. There's a crack of light at one of the windows." Which one, I wondered? Which window still showed a crack? "They're in there all right," Jim Clark said. "No place else they could be. I just want to know if they're hurt or sick. Don't like to think of them shut up in there needing help. I'm supposed to bring them home with me," Jim Clark said. They came to the back door. Their voices were directly outside, and Constance reached out her hand across the table to me. If it seemed that they might be able to look in, we could run together for the cellar. "Damn place is all boarded up," Jim Clark said, and I thought, good. Oh, that's good. I had forgotten that there would be real boards in the tool shed. I never thought of anything but cardboard, which is much too weak. "Miss Blackwood," the doctor called, and one of them knocked on the door. "Miss Blackwood, it's Dr. Levy." "And Jim Clark, Helen's husband. Helen is very worried about you. Are you hurt? Sick? Do you need help? Helen wants you to come to our house. She's waiting there for you." "Listen," the doctor said, and I thought he had his face up very close to the glass, almost touching it. He talked in a very friendly voice and quietly. "Listen, no one's going to hurt you. We're your friends. We came all the way over here to help you and make sure you were all right. And we don't want to bother you. As a matter of fact, we promise not to bother you at all, ever again, if you just want to say that you're well and safe. Just one word." "You can't just let people go on worrying and worrying about you," Jim Clark said. "Just one word," the doctor said. "All you have to do is say you're all right." They waited. I could feel them pressing their faces close to the glass, longing to see inside. Constance looked at me across the table and smiled a little, and I smiled back. Our safeguards were good and they could not see in. "Listen," the doctor said, and he raised his voice a little. "Listen, Julian's funeral is tomorrow. We thought you'd want to know. There are a lot of flowers already," Jim Clark said. "You'd be really pleased to see all the flowers. We sent flowers, and the Wrights, and the Carringtons. I think you'd feel a little different about your friends if you could see the flowers we all sent Julian." I wondered why we would feel different if we saw who sent Uncle Julian flowers. Certainly Uncle Julian buried in flowers, swarmed over by flowers, would not resemble the Uncle Julian we had seen every day. Perhaps masses of flowers would warm Uncle Julian dead. I tried to think of Uncle Julian dead, and could only remember him asleep. I thought of the Clarks and the Carringtons and the Wrights pouring armfuls of flowers down onto poor Uncle Julian, helplessly dead. "You're not gaining anything by driving away your friends, you know. Helen said to tell you..." "Listen." I could feel them pushing against the door. "No one's gonna bother you. Just tell us, are you all right? We're not gonna keep coming, you know. There's a limit to how much friends can take." Jonas yawned. In silence, Constance turned, slowly and carefully, back to face her place at the table and took up a buttered biscuit and took a tiny, silent bite. I wanted to laugh and put my hands over my mouth. Constance eating a biscuit silently was funny, like a doll pretending to eat. "Damn it," Jim Clark said. He knocked on the door. "Damn it," he said. "For the last time," the doctor said. "We know you're in there. For the last time, will you just..." "Oh, come away," Jim Clark said. "It's not worth all the yelling." "Listen," the doctor said, and I thought he had his mouth against the door. "One of these days, you're going to need help. You'll be sick or hurt. You'll need help. Then you'll be quick enough to..." "Leave them be," Jim Clark said. "Come on." I heard their footsteps going around the side of the house, and wondered if they were tricking us, pretending to walk away, and then coming silently back to stand without sound outside the door, waiting. I thought of Constance, silently eating a biscuit inside, and Jim Clark silently listening outside. And a little cold chill went up my back. Perhaps there would never be noise in the world again. Then the car started at the front of the house, and we heard it drive away, and Constance put her fork down on her plate with a little crash. And I breathed again and said, "Where have they got Uncle Julian, do you suppose?" "At that same place," Constance said absently. "In the city." "Merricat," she said, looking up suddenly. "Yes, Constance?" "I want to say I'm sorry. I was wicked last night." I was still and cold, looking at her and remembering. "I was very wicked," she said. "I never should have reminded you of why they all died." "Then don't remind me now." I could not move my hand to reach over and take hers. "I wanted you to forget about it. I never wanted to speak about it ever, and I'm sorry I did." "I put it in the sugar." "I know. I knew then." "You never used sugar?" "No." "So I put it in the sugar." Constance sighed. "Merricat," she said, "we'll never talk about it again. Never." I was chilled, but she smiled at me kindly, and it was all right. "I love you, Constance," I said. "And I love you, my Merricat." Jonas sat on the floor and slept on the floor, and I thought it ought not to be so difficult for me. Constance should have had leaves and soft moss under her blanket, but we could not dirty the kitchen floor again. I put my blanket in the corner near my stool because it was the place I knew best, and Jonas got up onto the stool and sat there looking down on me. Constance lay on the floor near the stove. It was dark, but I could see the paleness of her face across the kitchen. "Are you comfortable?" I asked her, and she laughed. "I've spent a lot of time in this kitchen," she said, "but I've never before tried lying on its floor. I've taken such good care of it that it has to make me welcome, I think." Tomorrow, we bring in lettuce. 10. Slowly, the pattern of our days grew and shaped itself into a happy life. In the mornings when I awakened, I would go at once down the hall to make sure the front door was locked. We were most active in the very early morning, because no one was ever around. We had not realized that with the gates opened and the path exposed to public use, the children would come. One morning, I stood beside the front door looking out through the narrow pane of glass and saw children playing on our front lawn. Perhaps the parents had sent them to explore the way and make sure it was navigable. Or perhaps children can never resist playing anywhere. They seemed a little uneasy playing in front of our house, and their voices were subdued. I thought that perhaps they were only pretending to play because they were children and were supposed to play, but perhaps they were actually sent here to look for us, thinly disguised as children. They were not really convincing, I decided as I watched them. They moved gracelessly, and never once glanced that I could see at our house. I wondered how soon they would creep onto the porch and press their small faces against the shutters, trying to see through cracks. Constance came up behind me and looked out over my shoulder. "They are the children of the strangers," I told her. "They have no faces. They have eyes. Pretend they are birds. They can't see us. They don't know it yet. They don't want to believe it, but they won't ever see us again. I suppose that now they've come once, they'll come again. All the strangers will come, but they can't see inside. And now, may I please have my breakfast?" The kitchen was always dark in the mornings until I unbolted the kitchen door and opened it to let the sunlight in. Then Jonas went to sit on the step and bathe, and Constance sang while she made our breakfast. After breakfast, I sat on the step with Jonas while Constance washed the kitchen. Barricading the sides of the house had been easier than I expected. I managed it in one night with Constance holding a flashlight for me. At either side of our house there was a spot where the trees and bushes grew close to the house, sheltering the back and narrowing the path, which was the only way around. I brought piece after piece from the pile of junk Mr. Harler had made on our front porch, and heaped the broken boards and furniture across the narrowest spot. It would not really keep anyone out, of course. The children could climb over it easily. But if anyone did try to get past, there would be enough noise and falling of broken boards to give us plenty of time to close and bolt the kitchen door. I had found some boards around the tool shed and nailed them rudely across the glass of the kitchen door. But I disliked putting them across the sides of the house as a barricade, where anyone might see them and know how clumsily I built. Perhaps, I told myself, I might try my hand at mending the broken step. "What are you laughing about now?" Constance asked me. "I am thinking that we are on the moon, but it is not quite as I supposed it would be." It is a very happy place, though. Constance was bringing breakfast to the table. Scrambled eggs and toasted biscuits and blackberry jam she had made some golden summer. "We ought to bring in as much food as we can," she said. "I don't like to think of the garden waiting there for us to come and gather growing things. And I'd feel much better if we had more food put securely away in the house. I will go on my winged horse and bring you cinnamon and thyme, emeralds and clove, cloth of gold and cabbages, and rhubarb." We were able to leave the kitchen door open when we went down to the vegetable garden, because we could see clearly whether anyone was approaching my barricades and run back to the house if we needed to. I carried the basket, and we brought back lettuce, still gray with ash, and radishes, and tomatoes and cucumbers, and later, berries and melons. Usually, I ate fruit and vegetables still moist from the ground and the air. But I disliked eating anything while it was still dirty with the ash from our burned house. Most of the dirt and the soot had blown away, and the air around the garden was fresh and clean. But the smoke was in the ground, and I thought it would always be there. As soon as we were safely settled, Constance had opened Uncle Julian's room and cleaned it. She brought out the sheets from Uncle Julian's bed and the blankets and washed them in the kitchen sink and set them outside to dry in the sunlight. "What are you going to do with Uncle Julian's papers?" I asked her. And she rested her hands against the edge of the sink, hesitating. "I suppose I'll keep them all in the box," she said at last. "I suppose I'll put the box down in the cellar." "And preserve it." "And preserve it." He would like to think that his papers were treated respectfully, and I would not want Uncle Julian to suspect that his papers were not preserved. "I had better go and see that the front door is locked." The children were often outside on our front lawn, playing their still games and not looking at our house, moving awkwardly in little dashing runs and slapping one another without cause. Whenever I checked to make sure that the front door was locked, I looked out to see if the children were there. Very often I saw people walking on our path now, using it to go from one place to another and putting their feet down where once only my feet had gone. I thought they used the path without wanting to, as though each of them had to travel it once to show that it could be done. But I thought that only a few, the defiant, hating ones, came by more than once. I dreamed away the long afternoon, while Constance cleaned Uncle Julian's room. I sat on the doorsill with Jonas asleep beside me, and looked out on the quiet, safe garden. "Look, Merricat," Constance said, coming to me with an armful of clothes. "Look, Uncle Julian had 2 suits and a topcoat and a hat. He walked upright once, he told us so himself. I can just barely remember him years ago going off one day to buy a suit, and I suppose it was one of these suits he bought. They are neither of them much worn." What would he have been wearing on the last day with them? What tie did he have on at dinner? He would surely like to have it remembered. She looked at me for a minute, not smiling. It would hardly have been one of these. When I came to get him afterwards at the hospital, he was wearing pajamas and a robe. Perhaps he should have one of these suits now. He was probably buried in an old suit of Jim Clark's. Constance started for the cellar, and then stopped. Merricat? Yes, Constance? Do you realize that these things of Uncle Julian's are the only clothes left in our house? All of mine burned, and all of yours. And everything of theirs in the attic. I have only this pink dress I have on. I looked down. And I am wearing brown, and yours needs washing and mending. How can you tear your clothes so, my Merricat? I shall weave a suit of leaves, at once, with acorns for buttons. Merricat, be serious. We will have to wear Uncle Julian's clothes. I am not allowed to touch Uncle Julian's things. I shall have a lining of moss for cold winter days and a hat made of bird feathers. That may be all very well for the moon, Miss Foolishness. On the moon you may wear a suit of fur like Jonas for all of me. But right here in our house you are going to be clothed in one of your Uncle Julian's old shirts, and perhaps his trousers too. Or Uncle Julian's bathrobe and pajamas, I suppose. No, I am not allowed to touch Uncle Julian's things. I will wear leaves. But you are allowed. I tell you that you are allowed. No. She sighed. Well, she said, you'll probably see me wearing them. Then she stopped, and laughed, and looked at me, and laughed again. Constance, I said. She put Uncle Julian's clothes over the back of a chair, and, still laughing, went into the pantry and opened one of the drawers. I remembered what she was after, and I laughed too. Then she came back and put an armload of tablecloths down beside me. These will do you very nicely, elegant Merricat. Look! How will you feel in this, with a border of yellow flowers? Or this handsome red and white check? The damask, I'm afraid, is too stiff for comfort, and besides, it has been darned. I stood up and held the red and white checked tablecloth against me. You can cut a hole for my head, I said. I was pleased. I have no sewing things. You will simply have to tie it around your waist with a cord, or let it hang like a toga. I will use the damask for a cloak. Who else wears a damask cloak? Merricat. Oh, Merricat. Constance dropped the tablecloth she was holding and put her arms around me. What have I done to my baby Merricat? She said. No house. No food, and dressed in a tablecloth. What have I done? Constance, I said. I love you, Constance. Dressed in a tablecloth like a rag doll. Constance, we are going to be very happy, Constance. Oh, Merricat, she said, holding me. Listen to me, Constance. We are going to be very happy. I dressed at once, not wanting to give Constance more time to think. I chose the red and white check, and when Constance had cut a hole for my head, I took my gold cord with the tassel that Constance had cut from the drawing room drapes and tied it around me for a belt, and looked, I thought, very fine. Constance was sad at first, and turned away sadly when she saw me, and scrubbed furiously at the sink to get my brown dress clean. But I liked my robe, and danced in it, and before long, she smiled again, and then laughed at me. Robinson Crusoe dressed in the skins of animals, I told her. He had no gay cloths with a gold belt. I must say you never looked so bright before. You will be wearing the skins of Uncle Julian. I prefer my tablecloth. I believe the one you are wearing now was used for summer breakfasts on the lawn, many years ago. Red and white check would never be used in the dining room, of course. Some days, I shall be a summer breakfast on the lawn. And some days, I shall be a formal dinner by candlelight. And some days, I shall be a very dirty Merricat. You have a fine gown, but your face is dirty. We have lost almost everything, young lady, but at least we still have clean water and a comb. One thing was most lucky about Uncle Julian's room. I persuaded Constance to bring out his chair and wheel it through the garden to reinforce my barricade. It looked strange to see Constance wheeling the empty chair, and for a minute I tried to see Uncle Julian again, riding with his hands in his lap. But all that remained of Uncle Julian's presence were the worn spots on the chair, and a handkerchief tucked under the cushion. The chair would be powerful in my barricade, however, staring out always at intruders with a blank menace of dead Uncle Julian. I was troubled to think that Uncle Julian might vanish altogether, with his papers in a box and his chair on the barricade and his toothbrush thrown away, and even the smell of Uncle Julian gone from his room. But when the ground was soft, Constance planted a yellow rose bush at Uncle Julian's spot on the lawn. And one night, I went down to the creek and buried Uncle Julian's initialed gold pencil by the water, so the creek would always speak his name. Jonas took to going into Uncle Julian's room, where he had never gone before, but I did not go inside. Helen Clark came to our door twice more, knocking and calling and begging us to answer, but we sat quietly, and when she found that she could not come around the house because of my barricade, she told us from the front door that she would not come back, and she did not. One evening, perhaps the evening of the day Constance planted Uncle Julian's rose bush, we heard a very soft knock at our front door while we sat at the table eating dinner. It was far too soft a knock for Helen Clark, and I left the table and hurried silently down the hall to be sure that the front door was locked, and Constance followed me, curious. We pressed silently against the door and listened. "Miss Blackwood?" someone said outside in a low voice. I wondered if he suspected we were so close to him. "Miss Constance? Miss Mary Catherine?" It was not quite dark outside, but inside, where we stood, we could only see one another dimly, two white faces against the door. "Miss Constance?" he said again. "Listen." I thought that he was moving his head from side to side to make sure that he was not seen. "Listen," he said. "I got a chicken here." He tapped softly on the door. "I hope you can hear me," he said. "I got a chicken here. My wife fixed it, roasted it nice, and there's some cookies and a pie. I hope you can hear me." I could see that Constance's eyes were wide with wonder. I stared at her and she stared at me. "I sure hope you can hear me, Miss Blackwood. I broke one of your chairs, and I'm sorry." He tapped against the door again, very softly. "Well," he said, "I'll just set this basket down on your step here. I hope you heard me. Goodbye." We listened to quiet footsteps going away, and after a minute, Constance said, "What shall we do? Shall we open the door?" "Later," I said. "I'll come when it's really dark." "I wonder what kind of pie it is. Do you think it's as good as my pies?" We finished our dinner and waited until I was sure that no one could possibly see the front door opening. And then we went down the hall, and I unlocked the door and looked outside. The basket sat on the doorstep, covered with a napkin. I brought it inside and locked the door, while Constance took the basket from me and carried it to the kitchen. "Blueberry," she said when I came. "Quite good, too. It's still warm." She took out the chicken, wrapped in a napkin, and the little package of cookies, touching each lovingly and with gentleness. "Everything's still warm," she said. She must have baked them right after dinner so he could bring them right over. I wonder if she made 2 pies, one for the house. She wrapped everything while it was still warm and told him to bring them over. These cookies are not crisp enough. "I'll take the basket back and leave it on the porch so he'll know we found it." "No, no." Constance caught me by the arm. "Not until I've washed the napkins. What would she think of me?" Sometimes they brought bacon, home-cured, or fruit, or their own preserves, which were never as good as the preserves Constance made. Mostly they brought roasted chicken, sometimes a cake or a pie, frequently cookies, sometimes a potato salad or coleslaw. Once they brought a pot of beef stew, which Constance took apart and put back together again according to her own rules for beef stew, and sometimes there were pots of baked beans or macaroni. "We are the biggest church supper they ever had," Constance said once, looking at a loaf of homemade bread I had just brought inside. These things were always left on the front doorstep, always silently, and in the evenings. We thought that the men came home from work and the women had the baskets ready for them to carry over. Perhaps they came in darkness not to be recognized, as though each of them wanted to hide from the others, and bringing us food was somehow a shameful thing to do in public. There were many women cooking, Constance said. Here is one, she explained to me once, tasting a bean, who uses ketchup and too much of it, and the last one used more molasses. Once or twice there was a note in the basket. This is for the dishes, or we apologize about the curtains, or sorry for your harp. We always set the baskets back where we had found them, and never opened the front door until it was completely dark and we were sure that no one was near. I always checked carefully afterwards to make certain that the front door was locked. I discovered that I was no longer allowed to go to the creek. Uncle Julian was there, and it was